Okay, that's it. We are live. I'll give it a couple seconds before we get started, as it usually takes a little bit of a time to catch up with the actual live. But we have a very special Archi-Tech Talks live today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just let everyone join and we will get started in a few seconds. So as you know, we've been doing this series since the start of the year. We've been a little bit slow getting them going, but we're now under full swing, and we've got quite a few lined up in the next few months in a build up to our conference. If you haven't heard about our conference, you can check it out. It's called the ATN Summit, which will be happening in March 2026. So stay tuned for that. I might talk a little bit more about it at the end. But today we have a very special live. We have episode 7, where we have the MVRDV crew, the next crew, who will be talking about their new CarbonScape tool, which is pretty awesome. Let me bring them onto the stage so I can say hello. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hello, hello. Nice to see you.
I also love that if you guys haven't checked out the episode that we did with the tour, they are sitting in the orange room, which we did the interview with Sanne, and also toured around the office as well. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out after the live. But how are you guys doing? How is sunny Netherlands?
Well, it's
Not so sunny?
not so
Probably
sunny.
not so sunny, right?
But I mean, Sunny is here, if you mean me. We are just very excited to be here and to be talking about, well, can I reveal what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, excellent, yeah. So we're very excited to be talking about carbon space.
Yeah, it's pretty cool what you guys have built, and we'll jump into that in a second. But for those of you who are new to the team here, this is, I guess, you're the Carbon Space team, but you're also part of the NEXT team, right? Which is the new experimental technologies team within the office, which covers everything computation and sustainability. Does that sound correct? Anything else we're missing? Bit of AI?
It's a good description. Indeed, we're the next team. We do R&D, development, research, implementation. We focus on urgency and relevance, and specifically climate and computation. And we operate throughout the office in all scales, sizes, phases of projects.
Yeah, and we had again, you guys can find out more about these guys in our tour. We can see everything behind the scenes. But today we're joined by Sanne van der Burgh, you're head of the next team. We've also got Arjen van der Watt and Bodewin Thomas. Hopefully I've nailed those pronunciations or got close, who are all part of the Carbon Space team. So thank you guys so much for joining.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to hand it over to you guys. I won't give too much more away, but I'll let you guys screen share, take it away, and show us what you're building.
Excellent. So here we go. Let me share my screen.
I think this is definitely the most colorful backgrounds for any of our lives that we've done so far.
Yeah, we like color.
Yeah.
Speaking of color, let me give you a short intro of what we've been doing, who we are, what we develop, why, before we actually jump into a live demo.
Sure.
So yeah, we're the next team. We work inside MVRDV. We are talking to you right now from our main office in Rotterdam, our mothership, where all the design work happens. This is our lunch table. We are about 300 people, and we have 5 offices beside Rotterdam. We have Shanghai, Paris, Berlin, and New York as side offices. And we work all over the world. We do infrastructure, residential, you name it. We like to do everything everywhere. And the next team specifically works on the things that happen under the hood. That can be spatial challenges, but also non-spatial challenges. And as the next team, today we will present you Carbon Space, which is what we've been developing. But this shows a bit of who we are as Next. Our projects are extremely diverse. This is the market hall, 4 minutes around the corner from our office in Rotterdam. We also work on cultural buildings. This is the depot, also in Rotterdam. We do housing, such as Valley in Amsterdam. But we also build projects in the US. We build projects in China. And we also work on infrastructural projects, such as this flyover in Seoul, where we actually kind of made a high line in the city. And we also work underneath flyovers. This is a small project that we made, which is a park underneath the flyover. And I love the fact that we won the Building of the Year 23 with this. To me, that shows that the discourse is constantly evolving and that projects like these are being seen and appreciated. We also do pretty normal things, such as 30% social housing in this project in Eindhoven. And we also build projects under 2,000 euro per square meter in Amsterdam. We have been thinking about sustainability since the beginning of MVRDV. And we see that sustainability is constantly evolving, the meaning of the term and the translation into architecture. This is, for example, our first completely demountable building that we realized and built in Amsterdam, Matrix 1. On the other hand, we also experiment with dreaming about buildings that might stand for 500 years, such as this building, Work 12 in Munich. We were able to utilize the foundations of a factory. These are double high floors, all the circulation is on the outside. So it is our hope and our dream that this building can constantly be reprogrammed, which it actually is, and therefore could still be here in 500 years from now. This is a project that we were quite well known for in 2000, the Expo 2000 in Hanover. It actually survived post-Expo life, so this became our first ruin. It always attracted a lot of informal visitors, let's say, and we're now very happy that we are transforming it back into a work and live project that you see right here. We do all of these things because let's look at Rome and Paris, two very nice cities, but they gave us very clear warnings already 50 years ago. The Club of Rome warned us about our behavior and the impact on the planet. And 10 years ago, we signed the Paris Agreement. Still, 24 is breaking records as the hottest year ever since we started measuring. And the author of the Paris Agreement is saying that what we are doing is suicidal. And we as an industry, as the building industry, are responsible for 39% of worldwide greenhouse gases, which means that we as architects can have impact. And according to the Architecture Journal, almost 200 times more impact through our work than through our lifestyles. If we think about emissions, there's two kinds of emissions, energy and embodied carbon. And embodied carbon, that is what we here design and draw today. And this is also what we emit today. So that's where the focus is of this tool. If we talk about impact, then 1 square meter of new construction equals a flight from London to New York. And if you translate that into projects, then this is the Shumyip Women's and Children's Center project in Shenzhen that we transformed in 1.5 years. We reused all of the concrete structure. And not only did it become a very colorful project, but by preserving the structure, we saved the equivalent of 11,800 flights from Amsterdam to Shenzhen. So we can absolutely have impact. If we continue business as usual, as is the norm still in many cases, then this might be our future. This is, by the way, an image from a Netflix documentary. There are existing frameworks, such as the LEEDs and the BREEAMs, but they have been designed before the Paris Agreement, so they are not yet carbon-first frameworks. So there is somehow a gap between the frameworks and the urgencies, how to bridge that gap. We've decided 5 years ago to jump into the world of carbon, and we experienced a very interesting journey. And a lot of the complexities that we were facing were the reason to develop Carbon Space. For example, every country has different legislation. Countries have different ways of measuring, different scopes, different lifetimes. Even different countries could project different carbon values. If we would take our market hall that's around the corner and put it in Sweden, then it seems to perform much better. And of course it doesn't because it's the same, but this is due to the way we count square meters in different countries. So this shows how complicated the carbon discourse can be. Even in the EU, there's many different benchmarks and milestones and targets that we should hit. There is a whole collection of different databases. They are all different. None of them are complete. They're all structured differently. Some of them are behind paywalls. If I'm an architect doing a competition, I can choose out of 1,000 cements, but I have no idea what kind of cement I'm using in a competition. And that's why we argue that it's dangerous to suffer from analysis paralysis, and we need less data, not more. Current calculation methods for embodied carbon happen very late in the process, where you need quite detailed models, meaning that yes, you can achieve a number, but at the end of the journey, when all the decisions have been made and when you're out of time and money. So we said we need to simplify. How can we talk about carbon from day one of the process? And this is Carbon Space, an early stage LCA for impactful design, for architects, by architects, but also for anyone invested in the global carbon discourse. It's an online web tool, and Boudewijn will give a live demo to show you what it is and how it works. But yeah, you can design with it from day one of the process, and this shows that you can, based on a napkin sketch, you can already predict roughly how your project is going to behave carbon-wise. This is how we use it in the office. This is our portfolio that we went through. All of these vertical bars are projects that we completely quantified and accounted for from the foundation piles all the way up to the BMU. And this shows how different projects behave. And you see there's a lot of diversity in there. By looking at this and understanding where the heavy hitters are, we can learn from ourselves and understand where to look. What you see here in this donut is the shearing layers of a building. So that separates the building in the different elements that also have different lifespans, but also different impact. So we have superstructure, substructure, skin, the space plan, and services. What we learned from ourselves is that structure is actually responsible for 65% of carbon emissions, and within structure, floors are actually a heavy hitter. That really helped us to focus on exactly floors and structure. What we also learned is that shape is actually not that impactful. We compared straight shapes to expressive shapes, and we saw that the difference is 3%. We did this for many projects. Somehow it always is 3%. So you can actually still experiment with shaping and shapes in architecture. We also learned that the impact lies not in facade cladding, because the facade cladding is in the end just the aesthetic layer that you look at, but that it's about everything that's behind the cladding, how your facades are made, how your floors are made, how your systems are made, essentially how your building is made, not what it looks like. That's how we learned through analyzing over 100 of our own projects that we can focus on weight, that this is something that everybody can use, this insight, and this is how we also try to steer our office towards the climate goals. By focusing on weight, we have one project where we applied timber floors, lightweight facades, and lighter foundations from day one of the process, and we achieved almost 50% reduction in embodied carbon emissions. This is where we currently are. This is our carbon commitment. We have 4 years and 2 months left to achieve our climate goals. This is live. This is our dashboard updated every day, and this shows how we are doing. And of course, depending on what projects come in, this percentage is going to change, but it gives us the information to look, to steer, and to have informed discussions with each other and with our clients. We have not developed Carbon Space by ourselves. We have been working with a lot of aspiring partners and carbon nerds from other offices, so thank you. We work together with the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, TU Delft in Berlin, Dutch Green Building Council, Bureau Happold, Group A, and Carbon Lab. And we're also happy to share that we are the official sustainability partner with Carbon Space for the Council on Vertical Urbanism, formerly the CTBUH. And why are we sharing this? We can get into that later, but we would like to create a carbon community where we can share best and worst practice, learn from each other so we can make meaningful steps as an industry. That's why we share our carbon guidelines. This is a poster that's everywhere in our office, and you can download it for free from our website. We also share our learnings, trials, and tribulations in a very interesting exhibition that is traveling around the world that you can see here. We already experienced it in Munich, Berlin, and Paris, and next year is going to travel to Toronto. And of course, the last thing that we are sharing that we're very excited about is Carbon Space. And what I also really enjoy is that one of the previous Archi-Tech talks, we had the Cyclops team from Foster & Partners that are also opening their tools to the community. And we love that. So thank you, Team Cyclops. And they released their tools very much focused on energy, environmental analysis. And we think it's fantastic that we can now add to the message of sharing with our embodied carbon design tool. And having said that, I give the floor to Boudewijn. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's a really great movement that you guys are now part of with Foster's and yourselves releasing some of these tools to the public. It's an exciting time to see that.
That's going to be 8.2. All right.
There's one small request from the comments. Can you guys hide the little stop sharing thing? There should be a little hide.
You can see it.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, I'll let you take it away.
Nice, thank you. All right, so you can access Carbon Space through carbonspace.earth, and this is the landing page that you will see. So what do we use Carbon Space for? We use it to track and trace our embodied carbon, and as Sanne already mentioned, we really focus on kind of simplifying it and bringing it really early in the design process. So it means that you can start with an early stage quick scan to really see where your impact is and where you can focus on, but also keep track of your project throughout the design phases and eventually combine them all in an overview to see how you're improving. This comes together in a dashboard. You can create one yourself using our open API. We'll get into that later. And this is what you can kind of do with that. So you can look at, for example, what kind of sourcing you have, or look at the shearing layers like we've been doing. To get into the tool, we click on try out on the top. I might change my mouse settings for a second. To change this thing so you can see it a bit better.
Amazing.
And we change the color into something a bit more visible. All right. So this is the landing page for the tool. I think most people nowadays know how to log in. We have a single sign-on as well. I'll just use my own demo account for this purpose. Kind of log in. Not today. And this is how this will look when you log in for the first time. So you will see your own kind of sandbox environment. You see this little project icon in front, and you will see a set of libraries that everyone gets from us. That's the Okobodot. It's a German open library that we loaded in, and we see the Carbon Space components, which are representative components made from the Okobodot database to help with easy and fast carbon calculations. So let's get into making one of those calculations. I'm going to click on my sandbox and click on the get started and make a new carbon calculation. We're going to make a quick scan for this tutorial, so you can use a different use different templates. We'll use the architectural quick scan. Hit save, and once you click on here, you will see that straight away you get some carbon numbers. So this already has some preset values to get you started. Every calculation consists of 4 different elements. We see a report. This is kind of a summary with some project information, some key indicators, and of course your carbon footprint by layer. And you'll also see the inventory. So the report is really made for kind of everyone to see, even printable. And the inventory is kind of where we get into the numbers. And this is where we add different quantities to the model. So you can get these from Rhino, you can get these from Revit, from a brief, from an email, wherever you want to get it from. And it's really made to be quick and easy. You can put in numbers directly. You can actually use formulas, or you can actually create a kind of a more parametric model by building expressions. These numbers are then put into the materials page, where we start to materialize the projects. So from quantities like GFA and facade area, we go to attaching material information. So for example, here we see a block here called structure. And in here we have CLT floors, we have concrete floors, and actually you see 4 types of structure, each with their own footprint. So 126, 666, etc.
66.
66, yeah, exactly. And these are different structural options that we build on the building GFA. So if we change the GFA, this number changes with it, and that way you have a parametric model that shows you your carbon footprint. You also see these little check marks on the side, so we can enable them or disable them. So on the bottom here, you see that within our options, within these 4 different structural options, it's somewhere in the range of 66 to 228. If I turn off the timber structure, you'll see that this number now pops to 126 to 228. I can start to eliminate more options, and I can even start to say, well, what if I build a hybrid version? And I say, okay, maybe it's 50% of this and 50% of that. And this will sum it up.
Yeah, so what you just did is change between comparing things and then adding them up.
Yeah, exactly. So you can test different options in one component to see the different kind of the bandwidth of options you have, and basically that maps out the impact that this decision might have. Or you can actually start building up kind of on the fly. Then we go into the details page, and here you get more detailed visuals. So for example, you see here what is the actual impact you can have with this design. So for these different shearing layers, we have different options set up. And on the left, you see what if you take all the low carbon options. You will end up with 417 kilograms of CO2 per square meter GFA. And if you take all the high carbon options, you'll end up around 546. You can play this game as well down here in this table, where you kind of see the same thing in a table format. So this gray is everything that's kind of locked in your decision making, and this blue part is still where there's impact. So here we can still turn off and on different elements, and you'll see the wheels adapt as well.
And these superstructure options that are in here, they're like preloaded because this just comes with the quick scan.
Yeah.
And for us, like on day 1 or very early in the process, you probably don't know what kind of structure you're going to use. Is it a concrete or a hybrid or a full timber? But in some cases, we also work in countries where timber construction is not a thing at all. So we can already switch those off. Exactly. And of course, you can add your own. So this is just a beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really made to kind of give you an indication of where is your impact. You see that, for example, structure in this option is around 33% of this pie, 34% here. So you can already start seeing, okay, how can I change that? Where's my impact lie? This is kind of just how we do a quick scan, and let's make a new one just for demonstration purposes. and I'll call this a top-up. So we're just going to add some GFAs on top of a building. Interesting.
Yeah.
You always see this happen, so that's why I have this resources box. I'll just drop it in.
Live demos.
Always happens live. So what I did here is, I'll just remove this for a second. So we're going to add a top-up. And I'm going to go to the inventory tab because I kind of want to model with this top-up. So what I do is I go to this little plus button here, so I can add a new parameter or a new property, and I'll call this top-up GFA. It'll automatically generate a key below, and I'll give it units square meter. You can add a description if you want as well. That will end up in one of these little question marks, which can be helpful for other people when they see your calculation later. So let's say that this, for example, is 20% of our gross floor area. So I'll add this gross floor area. And I'll type times 0.2. And this should give me 2,000 square meters. I can go to the materials section and start adding a group to that. I'll just delete this one for now.
Oh, yeah, because that was. Yeah.
And I'll add a new one.
Yes.
So we go into this, you'll see two boxes. You see this superstructure box. And inside there's two subgroups, the structure and the roof. It's nice to have a bit of a structure to this if you're going to analyze it later. But we can click here for a new group, and I'll add top-up. And we'll create this little top-up box below, and I can add a new component here by clicking on the plus. So this will bring up the search, and I can actually go to search and we'll look through this carbon space materials, components, and sandbox. So that's my libraries. And I can look, for example, my concrete structure. So this is where I find my concrete structure. I'll just click it, and you'll see it pop up here. Click on the expression, and I'll look up top-up GFA, and I can add that to here. If you click on the little refresh icon or the reset icon, it will just put only that parameter there. So in case you have bigger formulas, and this will add it to it. I can also add things by using the browse function. So sometimes it's easier to find things if you know where they are, or if you want to take them, for example, from a specific project that doesn't show up in the search box. So I'm going to add a timber structure by going to the carbon space components and go into our pre-made superstructures, into structural systems. I'll take a timber, CLT floors and glulam beams, 5.4 meter span, just as a test case. I'll just copy paste this down here. And what we do now is that we see that this is still set to some, while I'm actually comparing, I want to compare structural systems. So I'll toggle this to compare, and you'll see this change into a bandwidth. And this should now be also reflected on my details page and in my report. All right, so it's set to 642. If I now click on the plus and go for collection, I can start to compare these two quick scans. So I'll just call this comparison. Save it. And this is the view. You have to go to edit first, add layer, and you can just click on both the quick scans to load them in. You'll see them appear here. And in the view, you'll now see that the first quick scan has a minimum carbon footprint of 417 and a maximum footprint of an additional 130. So that's kind of the insecure zone. So there's less impact to be made. While quick scan 2 has a higher potential for being both lower in carbon footprint, but also in being more emissive than the initial quick scan. So there's a lot more bandwidth in quick scan 2 to work with. Yeah, you can compare these two options with each other. Is there anything you want to add to this?
Maybe, yeah, this is also how we use carbon space in the office. So we work with all of the project teams, and we're just going to say sit next to them and actually go through these discussions, like what is possible for your project, where should we look, and then we also compare the impact of different options. And this also goes into discussions with clients, consultants. So we find this an extremely useful tool to have informed discussions, and we already have experienced several moments in different projects where we were able to steer the project, the discussion, the results, the decision making, because we had this.
Yeah, what is also quite interesting about this one is that you can use it to compare different options, right? Option 1 to option 2. But we've also been using it to track and trace. So to look at, okay, this is the state in February and now the state in April or in June, and to see how the carbon is developing throughout the design process.
And I think about what is very interesting about this case is that often we do it in larger areas as well. If you imagine an urban project, right now these numbers are per meter square, but we also see that some other considerations can come into play. Do I make a large building a little bit more sustainable, or do I make a very small building a lot more sustainable per meter square?
Yes.
I think that is also why there are ways on the bottom to download this data in a simple Excel, but also to get this into Power BI, for example, where you can look at your own data and dig deeper.
Yeah, maybe that's a good link, because yeah, we're talking about buildings, but on an urban scale, we're also doing that now as carbon-based master planning, what I have mentioned, and it's about our portfolio approach. It's a balancing act. Like how do you divide your carbon budget over one or several projects?
All right, do we want to go through how to add a material first and then go to the dashboard?
Yeah, and just checking if there are already any burning questions in between, or shall we just continue?
Yeah, I've got some questions, but let's continue. Let's move on to materials, and then we'll do the questions.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, we have a bunch of preset materials in here. So like last example, we went through superstructure, structural systems. For example, you go to concrete, and you can kind of look through these different components and see how they're built up. So you can go into the edit mode, and you'll see that this concrete structure consists of a certain amount of concrete per square meter GFA. You can then kind of dig through all of these layers to find out, okay, this is 1.5% reinforced concrete, this type of concrete, and all the way at the end of this, you will find an EPD endpoint. In our case, this will be for the carbon-based materials, this will definitely be Okobodot data. And what you will also see here is that there's actually a bunch of different concretes inside that database. So what we did is we said, okay, you know what? We will take a look at all of these different numbers, and we will take a representative kind of middle point as the same default to start from. And during our projects, we'll update this concrete mix or a concrete producer as we learn more. So we really use it to budget our carbon footprint in that matter. What's also possible is that your material doesn't exist in this library because it's intentionally made small so that you can find things easily and not get stuck in thousands of different options. So let's make a material. You can do that in your project, but it would be better to actually do that in the library. You do that by creating a new project. So I'll call this the demo library. I'll put it in my sandbox workspace. And all the way on the side, you see this little pencil icon for editing, and you can click this is a library. And if you click enable library by default, it will also end up in your search results. So you can save that, and you'll see the icon change to this little book. So you can click on that, and I'll create a new product. And I'll call this my EPD data. I'll hit save, and I actually, on this computer, I'll have to.
If you Google it, and I can talk through it, but
yeah.
indeed, We get a lot of questions from people about the data and what database did we use, but also EPDs. So we always use the EcoCocon EPD as an example. It's a fantastic modular straw construction project. And probably during the questions, during the Q&A, the discussions about sustainable concrete will come up, because we always have very lively discussions about concrete at a certain point in this in the presentation and discussion. So we will definitely get into that in the Q&A.
So what you can do is you can take your PDF and you can dump it here in the attachments. And then we click on Analyze using OpenAI. This will analyze the document and will put down all the information it finds in there. It can take it can take a minute or something like that. So I've already prepared one. So I'll just drag that over. And it will analyze the document and take out like a description, what does it contain, etc. And it will automatically fill in biogenic carbon, your LCA phase emissions. And you can always look up the document afterwards again. So there's this little PDF viewer where you can always consult on the actual data that's in there as well. So this really helps in the whole transparency part. So from a library and a quick scan, I think it's a good time to go to the dashboard. I might have to, how are we going to show that?
Good question. Let me open my laptop.
Okay, laptop.
Yes. But so now you've seen kind of the logic behind Carbon Space, how we use it in discussions to get actually decision making happening, and how we're just also learning on the fly what has impact and what not. And I think specifically within our approach, we chose from the beginning onwards to do something which is actually very logical, which is to go from rough to fine. So we don't start our concept design with an EPD. We start with a bandwidth. We work with ranges, with same defaults that apply for a concrete. And the further we get, the more we know. And then at a certain point, you can start refining your information once you know your contractor and the actual building systems. And that's how we approached the challenges of data delirium and overload.
Yeah, what we also found is that, it's how to focus on things. Because one of the things that is very easy to get lost in, for example, you can see it here, there's a timber or CLT or concrete roof elements, but they don't scale the same way that, for example, structure does, right? So there's relatively high amount of structure per square meter rather than roof. And also the same goes for example, your facade. So it really helps with also giving a bit of a sensitivity analysis on what kind of materials am I using and how important is the decision that I'm currently making in terms of CO2.
Just checking with Ollie, is it okay if I join with my laptop to share?
Yeah, if you join with your laptop, just remember turn your audio and video off probably so we don't get a loop.
I'll do that.
Then you can share screen. But yeah, really interesting to see this. I think it's just to maybe zoom out on how you guys use this. So I can see from an early stage, you can just put numbers in literally as you're kind of, okay, we know that we got this much GFA, we could go towards a timber frame superstructure and very early on start to get a feel for your, carbon footprint. But then is the idea as the design gets more detailed, you don't need to connect it to the model because you could just input the areas directly from the model? Is that how you kind of evolve from super early to kind of concept stage design analysis?
Yeah, so at a certain moment you will start to, right? So this is really a quick scan, like really easy, small amount of numbers, which makes this kind of parametric model a lot more agile or a bit more free to use. And it also saves a lot on modeling. but we certainly had experiences also with using complete BIM models inside this as well. In that case, the carbon space environment becomes a bit more heavy to work with, because you can imagine if you have 200, 300 Revit line items in there, it just starts to struggle a bit. So we're also working on how to make that a bit more abstract and manageable. So there's kind of this magic moment, and I think that's the same way that you work in maybe a Rhino or a SketchUp, kind of more massing and kind of sketching environment, and you go into BIM where you start to model every element separately. There's also a kind of data management behind that as well. Do you want to?
Yeah, but maybe actually now when we're talking about, like, we can do this from a napkin sketch all the way to as built with all the screws and door handles and everything. What we also learned is we literally went through over 100 projects that we compared very high level detail versions of a project with very rough versions of the same project. And we saw that we can really quite accurately predict what's going to happen already based on a model with not that much information. So that's also why one of our mottos is rough is good enough, and based on already early amounts of information, you can say pretty sensible things. Yeah. So that's for us, that was really useful to get out of the analysis paralysis and the data traps that are in there.
Yeah, that's a great point to know, actually, that the early stage was not a million miles away from the detailed stuff. And I guess, which was like sort of one of my questions, is I guess that's because the big ticket items in terms of carbon that's your superstructure, how much facade area you have, and the materials of those, right? Those are your big spaces to reduce your carbon.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, literally that. So indeed, your foundations, your basements, your load-bearing structures, and those are the heavy hitters, and they will anyway exist. So that for us was very helpful to just have the discussion earlier on.
Yeah. And Sanne, if you want to share your screen, give it a go. But
share.
I'll stop sharing from here.
Yep, and then I will share from here. Hold on.
Are there like big ticket wins, as in like I know, is mass timber and timber frame construction the solution to significantly reducing your carbon? Is there other things that you guys have been experimenting with?
This is perfect timing, because that is actually what I wanted to share.
Okay.
So this is our dashboard, right? This is our portfolio. This is this is a large amount of projects all over the world. And what we see from this overview is a couple of things that are very interesting. For example, we have projects in there like this one, currently called Orange Jasmine, that is an extremely low carbon footprint. We also have a weighted average here, which is the orange line that looks at the amount of square meters with that carbon footprint. But we also see that we have projects in there with very high carbon footprints. And that is caused by, on one side, just the typology, right? Like a high rise is just a different animal than a small residential block. And what we learned from this is mainly that there's, according to us, not really a good or bad, but within your typology, within your category, you can look for ways to make it as low carbon as possible. What we also see is that in different parts of the world, the opportunities are different. So, for example, in Asia, timber construction is not at all a thing. But the discussions we have there are very much focused on weight, lightweight facades, and also on exploring if we can do less basements, potentially move parking to first, second floor, above grade. And those are like the strategic discussions we have in Asian context. Then again, the discussions are different in a US context, but in Europe, what we see is that we have the EU Green Deal, that is also forcing us to achieve climate goals in 2030. And here there is already much more focus on timber construction, specifically timber hybrids. And in general, also what we start to see is an increasing interest in not building, meaning increasing interest in transformations, reusing existing structures, unstranding stranded assets, transforming buildings, giving them a new life. So it's a combination of things from renovations to lightweights, to look at basements, to lightweight facades, to bio-based materials. We just received a planning permit for our first straw bale building, which we're very happy with. That if you think of MVRDV as the architecture that you have just seen, we are also learning new things, trying new things, and pretty soon you will see in the media an announcement of our first straw bale building. So it's a balancing act. There is no singular solution, but there is a range of strategies that you can mix and match and apply to your projects.
Right, yeah. So I've seen a lot of people building in straw. Actually, it seems like the new thing. Hemp. Have you guys ever experimented with hemp yet?
Oh yes, we had a lot of hempcrete discussions. We also have some hempcrete, so yeah, we're experimenting. We also went through a rammed earth phase. We actually have. That's actually funny to share that we have one project in Germany where we had a Revit activist. So it's someone from our team who was working in the Revit model and decided that, okay, I'm just going to put one earth wall in this project to see what happens. And then the contractor said, what's this? And I said, yeah, this is an earth wall. And okay, is it certified? Yes, it's certified. And does it exist? Yeah, it exists. And then somehow what happened is that they said, okay, if we're going to do it for one wall, we can do it for all the walls. So that's how we got earth walls in one of our projects in Germany. So it can really come from many different corners, these decisions and events that happen.
But in terms of superstructure seems to be the main enemy, I guess, or opportunity when you're trying to build low carbon buildings. Is timber the answer? Is low carbon concrete actually that low carbon? Can concrete compete with timber? That's one thing I've always not 100% known.
Well,
is that a tricky question, is it?
No, yeah, I mean, it is the question of all questions. But there is no good or bad. But if you look at let's say the race between the different countries or between the different regions we work in, you can already see that in Europe we manage to achieve lower carbon superstructures than in Asia. That's just because of the way that we build things currently. So is timber good? Is timber bad? What we see is that timber hybrids are extremely useful and extremely impactful, but they're also subject to a lot of discussion in some countries or contexts because some clients might find that they're too expensive or too risky or just too unconventional. So even things like just reducing weight of the slabs can also already help to focus on hollow core slabs or ribbed slabs. Those already have much less carbon emissions than reinforced concrete slabs. So it helps. But if you want to use these kind of strategies, you really need to have them from the beginning of the process. Because the moment you start to use ribbed slabs, you get into discussions with your MEP guys that won't be happy that they have to think about the piping much earlier in the process. Right. What we also learned is that if you do choose to work in mass timber, the discussions about the details, the level of detail is much earlier in the process. So you much earlier need to look at, okay, what's the system? How are we connecting things? So the design discussions are wildly different according to the opportunities within your project. But yeah, timber is one solution, not possible everywhere because of many different reasons. But yeah, hollow core slabs, ribbed slabs, or of course, not building at all.
And I think that's also what makes this for us such a useful tool to use in the start. So
Yep.
we can just look at these different systems, see what the potential impact is, and just have a good conversation about what's possible and what's the impact.
Yeah, and maybe to just talk about sustainable concrete, because we want to. So there are sustainable concretes, and there's also a lot of people that say, I'm going to use sustainable concrete from day one, so my project is sustainable. And the trick with sustainable concrete is that it works with byproducts from the steel industry. Because that is a byproduct, it's actually limited in supply and availability. So if we would all use, say, sustainable concrete made with byproducts from the steel industry, the world supply would be depleted tomorrow. So it might be a solution for your project, but it's not a global solution for the global climate crisis. And there are, of course, always initiatives to decarbonize the concrete industry further and to look at recycled concretes, reused concretes. In the end, the main climate impact of concrete is cement that needs to be heated to very high, actually, to create cement, you need very high temperatures achieved with fossil fuels. And there's now a CCS carbon capture storage plant in Norway where they actually capture the carbon, pressurize it, put it in a boat, put it under the ground. So there are things, but also, let's say availability and scalability is still a challenge.
Yeah. Another question I had, and guys that are listening in, there's a few questions already in the chat. Put your question in the chat and I'll read it out if it hasn't already been answered, because there's some that you guys have already covered. I thought it was interesting you were saying about the facade material, the geometry of the building doesn't necessarily have a huge impact. One question I have is I always thought or understood that like double curve geometry can actually create quite a big impact in terms of carbon, because you kind of like increase your deliveries because you're like, panels don't stack that easily, machinery gets used more. Is there have you ever looked into that? Like if it's complicated geometry, does that increase your carbon footprint?
I think, well, we looked at Depot, for example, which
is around Silver Bowl building.
Around Silver Bowl, and there you see that the transport of the facade really had a big impact. So that's but part of that is uncertainty. It was never built with carbon in mind. So turning it around, it would be okay. How close can you pack them? Because the wastage of the panels itself was not the biggest part. In general, a lot of waste is generated in glass, and that was also to a certain degree for Depot, but a lot of the panels are actually quite regular. So the wastage on the panels itself was not the biggest, but transport was quite far.
And I would say when it comes to complex geometries, what we see here because we have our data set, we also have all of the analytics of our own data, and that is compactness of buildings. And I would say that might relate most to complex geometries. If we look at the Valley project with all of the cantilevers, it's about creating more surface area, and therefore your building is less compact. But you can see here that, let's say, on average, there's high concentration of buildings with a compactness of 0.5. So that's also the reason why that's pre-filled in your quick scan, because that is also what we are getting from our own projects and our own data.
And compactness, how do you measure that? Is that GFA to the facade envelope?
Yeah.
Or...
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good. Again, a lot of architects don't actually measure this, right? Like, what is your external skin to your internal GFA or GIA or whatever you're measuring? Obviously, this is a subject very close to my heart. With sustainable housing that we were building. Maybe one technical question, this might be a tricky one, but like whenever I speak to people in this LCA space, there seems to be a debate whether you include sequestered carbon or not, right? Why is this? Why is this an argument? Why do some people say you shouldn't count sequestered carbon versus you should?
Who wants to do? Yeah, I think we all want to talk about it.
It might be a juicy question, but
Okay, interesting.
I think in general we do keep track of it, but we don't deduct it. Mainly because we think there are two things. In many ways, we're in a stage where we're talking about finance. In sort of, if you would draw a parallel with finance, most people will understand a loan and repayment and sort of an investment. And with carbon, we see a lot of kilogram CO2 signs, and we want to somehow add them up. But the amount of carbon that is stored in your bio-based materials, it is very worthwhile to know. We don't think it makes a lot of sense to add them up, to sort of add them up, to add them all up, because you somehow take different things and you put them into one number. I think one of the discussions we often have is how big should the forest be that you have to bury next to the Burj Khalifa to make it sustainable.
right.
So somehow biogenic carbon, deducting it from fossil carbon, it sort of steers away from the idea that you should use less material rather than more. It sort of tries to say, oh, you should put more timber in it. But less timber is still better than, or less material is still better. I think that is
right. So it's important, but you kind of have to give it a different weighting.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to earmark it. So that's also how we treat it, is that it's separate. So you can have the discussion.
Maybe you can show it in the.
Which one?
We have our sourcing.
Yes. Oh, yes.
This one, yeah.
This one, for example, shows in terms of weight, how much percentage of the materials we have used are either finite, recycled, or bio-based. So this is of the whole portfolio, and there you see that. So it is based on mass, which is a bit tricky because timber is light, so you will never have a lot of weight. But you see that on average, I think I can't read it that well from here.
1%, yeah, and that is exactly why it's so interesting. Is we're currently involved in several discussions about percentages of bio-based in buildings. And what this shows is the discussion is very difficult if it's in weight, because a cubic meter of concrete is just much heavier than a cubic meter of straw.
Yeah, it's an unfair.
Yeah, it's
I see what you're saying. You can have a lot more timber for the same weight as a bit of concrete, right? I see.
Yes.
And just to go, you got bio-based, recycled, finite, and what's the fourth one?
Bio-based, recycled, finite.
Yeah, renewable.
Yeah, renewable.
Finite,
renewable. Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
So
Great.
Maybe just to mention like this, what you're looking at now, like the dashboard and everything, this is what we build ourselves in Power BI, separate from Carbon Space. So we use Carbon Space to go through all of the projects, to analyze, to steer, inform decision making, and this is our backside that we build ourselves to monitor on a daily basis how we're doing and where we should focus.
Amazing.
Also
that's very cool to see.
Also on the docs, there are some tutorials on how to do this yourself using the API. So
yes,
you can start to do some data analytics on.
That's one of the first questions. Is there any documentation? Someone asked. I saw on the website that it says there's a document section. So go check out the website, guys. We got a good question come in. How does Carbon Space balance the trade-off between embodied carbon in construction and operational carbon in building life? I know that's opening up a can of worms here, but yeah, how do you balance the two between operational and embodied?
I think we prefer to refer to it as energy, because that's also one of the joys of working in many different countries, is that in France, energy is very much nuclear, and in other countries it's very much fossil-based or hydro or wind. So yeah, depending on the energy mix of wherever you're working, operational carbon is different. So we look at energy. We also see that what we need to do, if you look at the urgency, is achieve impact now, which is focus on embodied carbon, and looking at energy, even though it's important, and all of the buildings in the EU anyway need to become zero energy buildings, that this is something that happens over time. And we have some influence on it, but in the end, most energy is not used by buildings, but by people. So that's why we kind of went from the area where we have less influence to our direct sphere of influence, which is embodied carbon impact now. And then indeed, there is the discussion between, triple glazing, the amount of embodied carbon, and then the savings in the future. And what we already see is that these discussions are changing. Do you guys want to add something to? What is this?
There is a little.
Yeah, there's a little widget that we built to do this.
Oh yeah, actually, let's.
So I might just kind of reshare the screen.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Some just was some quick ones. Someone asked, like, is this a web-based thing or a plugin? It's clearly a web-based stuff, but have you guys ever made a plugin that connects the model to this? Again, go back to the question of, do you need that? Is this something you have in-house so you can connect from Grasshopper to Carbon Space?
Such a only good questions today. Can I start and then you guys take it up? So 5 years ago, we started with let's do something with carbon, and we started with the Grasshopper plugin. And so we made that, and then we realized, first of all, well, Grasshopper is still for people, it's not as accessible as a web tool, but what we mainly learned is what we've been talking about today is the impact of shape is not that big, and it's more about looking at the structure, looking at the building systems, looking at the building materials, and that's how we went from Grasshopper to web-based.
But we've come full circle, so we do have an in-house Grasshopper plugin that is still a bit too rough to throw at the rest of the world, but we intend to release that in a later stage.
Yeah.
But through this API, this is perfectly possible to connect all and any tools. So it's quite open for any developers to do with it what you want, and to build your own tools upon this.
It's kind of fun that we went full circle. We're starting with Grasshopper and then going all the way through this, and now back to Grasshopper.
One of the experiences that we had was also the management of what types of materials and keeping the calculation kind of sensible and manageable became increasingly complicated through Grasshopper. So that's why also the web tool helps on a UI level. It's more comfortable.
But it's interesting that it comes back to that. Actually, the kind of quick calculation is almost as accurate as the straight from the model kind of calculation. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and also I think one of the things that we also see is that, when you're working, for example, with the Revit model, the Revit model is not always as complete as well, right? So you're never doing a calculation with a 100% model.
Yeah, that's true.
You're always working with something that's work in progress, so you might be missing parts, or you have duplicates in there. It's always a bit of grinding through the models in a way. To come back to the earlier question about the trade-offs, we did build this little widget in the details section where you can include energy. So you can start to say something about the amount of energy consumption in kilowatt hour per square meter per year. There are some kind of typical values that we have here. You can also punch your own number in, and you can choose how much of that energy is electric or renewable. And it also does something with, in the future, energy will likely be more CO2 neutral than it is today. So here you can see the amount of embodied carbon that you'll emit when building the building. And then the yellow parts are the amount of carbon you're going to spend on operating that building. In this case, with a fully electric 50 kilowatt hours per square meter building. You can also add them up, and you'll kind of see this graph. So it will take you about 50 years to reach a break-even point between these two.
Wow. So it really...
While this part is very speculative, because people might not actually use this amount of energy. We might get CO2 neutral earlier, right? Maybe in 2050. Could also be that we're in a country with more fossil fuels in their energy mix.
Yeah. But yeah, it shows again the impact of embodied carbon.
Yeah,
today.
it's huge. That's very cool to see. So, what's the UK like? How are we on?
What's the UK like? UK. Oh, yeah, pretty good.
Not too bad.
Good.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Even more important than embodied carbon in the UK.
Yeah. Maybe one just last couple of questions. I know I don't want to keep you guys too long, but someone's asking about how to add their own local material data, and I do remember this from my own experience with LCA stuff. Is it all revolves around these EPDs, right? Which is, the material goes to this lab or whatever. It's like an official rating of the carbon. But what happens if you use materials that don't have an EPD and you just need to, do you guesstimate? How do you deal with that?
Ideally, we use materials that have a source, because then it's also clear where the gas comes from. But you're also perfectly allowed to create a fictional material, which is sometimes what happens. Sort of, let's imagine a material that is very low carbon. You can still add quite easily your own materials as well, or sort of materials that come from an Excel sheet, or in England popular the inventory of carbon and energy. It's also not really EPDs, but it is a comprehensive set. You can use them to create your own materials.
Yeah, but it is a bit of a bottleneck if you're in let's say South America or something where they may not have the data. This is like a challenge we have to basically work out the ratings for all these different materials, right?
Yeah, so our kind of position on that is also to just say use same defaults, because it's unlikely that for example, a concrete made in one place to another is significantly different. Yeah. Right, or a brick. So also, if you don't really know, you can also try to look up, for example, a representative material, where you do have data from, and just use that until you have better info. So, and then, and also when you see it has a really high impact, then it might also be worthwhile to dig a bit deeper and see if you can actually find a source that has better data. But sometimes you also find you're going through a lot of efforts to find data that has no impact. Yeah.
Two final questions. Someone's asking how do we start any analysis for our conceptual 3D model design? I mean, maybe just to reiterate that you guys you need to take out numbers from your own model and then input it into this, right? It's you just plug in the numbers. That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of answered that for you guys, but and then someone's asking an odd-ish question. Does this product differ from Autodesk Forma? Does Autodesk Forma calculate embodied energy?
Yes. Well, this project is different than Forma.
Yeah.
I think that's a clear yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm guessing yours is a lot more detailed, I'd imagine.
Well, and I think we are not a 3D modeling environment, so there's also a bit of a difference in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, congrats! Amazing products. Really impressed you guys. Release this and give it to the world. I think it's an exciting new trend to see you know, these amazing architecture firms like yourselves sharing this information, which I think is much needed. So congratulations. I'll definitely give it a go myself with some project information I had. So yeah, I wish I'd known about this a bit before. Actually, I could have used it. But yeah, thank you guys. If anyone has any questions, where's the best place to reach out to you? So just reach out on LinkedIn, or if they want to ask you questions about Carbon Space.
There's a button in carbonspace.earth saying get in touch, and then you reach us. And you can also find us on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we'll hopefully get you guys to talk more about this at our conference. If you're listening to this and you haven't known, we're creating our own conference next year in March called the ATN Summit. So stay tuned for that. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on the live. Thanks everyone in the audience that joined. Thanks for all the questions. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, I think, with some AI stuff. We're going to go back down the AI road. Should be kind of interesting. But yeah, thank you guys and the next team for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys.